There are just some places where the air itself feels judgmental, like it knows exactly how much money you didn't spend on your outfit. That was Crestwood Academy's graduation day, and I felt it the second my old, patched-up service jacket walked onto their perfectly manicured lawn. My name is Alara Vance, and I was there to see my son, Orion, graduate as valedictorian. 17 years old, brilliant, and, well, he was mine. I'd earned my seat. Row 4, taped neatly with the name Vance, but I knew that seat was never really meant for me. Not in this town, Athens Heights. I just settled in, feeling that quiet, steady pride deep in my chest when the coral silk arrived. That was Veronica Sterling, the queen of Crestwood's donor board. She looked like she was genetically engineered in a country club lab. All perfect blonde waves and oversized sunglasses perched like a crown. She didn't look at me. Not really. But her gaze skimmed over my worn-out field boots and my faded jacket like I was a piece of misplaced equipment. And then I heard it, that stage whisper designed to carry. Did they forget to clear the clutter from the VIP section, principal? The chain reaction was instant. A flutter of activity, a note passed to the headmaster, and within minutes, 2 security guards, all crisp suits and practiced neutrality, were standing right there. They didn't shout. They didn't accuse. They just smiled, that polite, plastic smile that told you everything was fine, except you weren't. Ma'am, so sorry for the inconvenience, but we're having some unexpected staging issues. Could we just move you back a couple of rows for a moment? This is where you learn the game. If you raise your voice, you lose. If you demand validation, you lose. I just looked up, held their eyes for a second, soft voice, hard stare, and said, "This is my chair. My son is the valedictorian." They nodded, their faces unmoving walls. "Just a temporary adjustment, Ms. Vance. We promise you'll still have a great view." So I stood, not in defeat, but in recognition of the system. First, they moved me 2 rows back. Then, Veronica's best friend suddenly needed a better angle for photos, so I was nudged again. And then a major sponsor had a clerical error on their ticket. Inch by inch, polite push by polite push, they walked me down the aisle until I was sitting in row 10. The last row, under a slightly sagging banner that read, "Class of 2024. No one sat near me. I was the statue of the invisible mother, surrounded by the scent of expensive perfume and chatter about summer homes and alumni funds. I didn't let my hands shake. I just held the program tight, resting on my lap, my eyes locked on the stage where Orion was lining up. He didn't know yet, and he wouldn't. I wanted him to believe his mother was exactly where she belonged. Because I was. They could take the chair, but they couldn't take the foundation. See, to understand why a folding chair mattered so much, you have to know what it took to get here. My husband, Javier, he was my anchor. He was second-gen Latino, the son of a mechanic and a housekeeper. When I brought him home, my father looked at his brown skin and his steady handshake like he was a contagion. They didn't say the words, not out loud, but the silence at the dinner table was deafening. This kind don't stick around, Alara. Aren't you worried about the life you're choosing? We chose isolation. We got married at the courthouse, toasted with cheap champagne and leftover carne asada in our beat-up double-wide. We had Orion when we had $37 to our name. But he was healthy, with his father's wide, wondering eyes. We were building something beautiful, inch by hard-won inch. Then, the Tuesday morning call. A lift cable at the garage snapped. A worn link that should have been replaced. Javier was gone, crushed under a car, while covering for a kid who was late for his shift. The company denied everything. The case was tossed. Insufficient evidence. That kind of silence, it makes you wonder if you were ever heard all. When I tried to enroll Orion in the good school district, I was told there were limited spots for accommodating peers. He was 5. He came home asking why the kids said he looked like a person on TV. That was the moment I stopped fighting for myself and started fighting for him. Quietly, I started studying at night, not for a degree, but to survive. I learned engines, brake pads, HVAC systems. I opened my own small shop, working nights, head down, never giving anyone a reason to pity me, never giving them the chance to stop me. Atherton Heights tried to erase Javier, and it sure tried to make Orion invisible. But that slow burn, that quiet fury, It forged something steel-strong inside me. I built a reputation as the one who fixed things others missed. And that's how I met the other group of people who saw me for who I was, not who I appear to be. It started with a flyer for a civil defense training program, run by former military and state response teams. I applied, wearing my work boots and that patched-up jacket. Most recruits were former special forces or firefighters. I stuck out like a sore thumb, short, quiet, and absolutely non-military. They noticed me 2 weeks in during an urban hostage simulation. I rerouted 2 units down an alley that wasn't on the grid. Old city schematics, I told the commanding officers simply. Most places don't update them fast enough. They call me Anchor, not as a joke, as a title. I was the one who could spot the weakness in 2 perfect plans, the one who found stability in total chaos. I taught them how to read wind shifts by the leaves on the sidewalk, how to anticipate choke points. They taught me movement patterns. I never pretended to be one of them. I didn't need to be. Then came the heat stroke incident. A young Marine recruit, Deacon, collapsed. I was the only one who saw it. I ran back, dragged him across the asphalt, and started pouring water over his neck while shouting for medical. I beat the nearest assigned medic by 23 seconds. After that, the way they stood around me changed. No more half-glances. They took notes when I spoke. They started showing me satellite recon maps over lunch. On the last night of the rotation, 6 of them approached my truck silently. Each one handed me a dark green canvas patch. Embroidered in dull thread, it read, Anchor. They didn't say goodbye. They just nodded and walked away. They deployed the next week. I never talked about it, not to Orion, not to anyone. But that morning, the morning of his graduation, I pulled that old jacket out of the closet, opened the glove box, and took out the patch. I sewed it quietly and carefully onto the inside lining, right over my heart. Because they could move my chair, but they could not move my place. The ceremony unfolded the way it always does here in Atherton Heights. Predictable, polished, and timed perfectly to reflect the town's belief in its own superiority. The choir sang, the headmaster rambled about tradition, and the parents clapped on cue, wiping away convenient, sentimental tears. I sat there in row 10, a quiet island in a sea of silks and pearls, my gaze fixed on Orion, willing him not to look back and see me relegated to the periphery. A few rows in front, Veronica Sterling was having her moment. Her daughter floated across the stage, more swan than student, honestly, and Veronica practically broke her camera trying to trap the pride inside a frame. She glanced back once, satisfied, her gaze sliding right over me. I wasn't angry, just tired, but ready. Then there was a snag, a glitch in the rhythm. Somewhere near the edge of the venue, you could hear it, the sound of shoes on gravel. Measured steps, rhythmic, intentional. From the west corner, a single figure emerged. Tall, lean, dark suit. He walked with a purpose that sliced right through the polite ceremony. Then another and another, until 6 men were moving down the central aisle, in lockstep, quiet but undeniable. The crowd broke around them like water. Whispers started, heads swiveled. The headmaster, looking visibly panicked, leaned over and hissed, "Who are they? Do you know them?" No one did, except me. My heart didn't race. It just settled. That deep exhale I've been holding on to since I first sat down in row 4. I didn't move a muscle, but I reached up and gently touched the inside lining of my jacket, right above my heart. The 6 men stopped at the base of the stage. They didn't look at the headmaster. They didn't ask permission. One of them, the tallest with a sharp jawline, reached into his inner pocket and pulled out a small, dark green cloth. He handed it to the nearest usher. It was the patch. Anchor. Then he turned to face the entire audience. His voice was clear, calm, and steady, cutting through the silence like a scalpel. We came here today to honor the woman who taught us how to think when fear told us to run, who didn't wear rank but earned command, who saved one of us in heat stroke and saved all of us in silence. He gestured slowly, deliberately, straight back to row 10, where I was sitting motionless, my eyes finally starting to sting. That woman right there. We call her Anchor. You call her the mother of the valedictorian. Either way, No one in this place deserves a front row more than her. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy, reverent. And then Orion moved. He was standing behind the podium, frozen for a moment, and then he walked down the steps. He walked straight toward the 6 men. He didn't say a word. He just extended his hand, and all 6 of them, simultaneously, crisply saluted him. That was the sound barrier breaking. One clap started it, then a few more, then the thunder. The whole stadium erupted, people standing up, not because they were told to, but because finally, something true had been spoken out loud. I stayed seated. I let the applause wash over me. What needed to be said had been said, and I didn't have to be the one to say it. The headmaster tried to regain control, his voice cracking, his robotic cadence gone. He read the remaining names off the list, but his gaze never once drifted back toward row 10. Veronica Sterling just froze, that brittle smile of hers threatening to shatter completely. The spotlight had changed direction, and this was something she couldn't buy back. The Sentinels remained in their quiet formation until the final cap was thrown. They hadn't come for the crowd. They had come for me. Then, the final name, Valedictorian Orion Vance. He walked across the stage, accepting his diploma, but his steps were deliberate. He didn't look at the headmaster. He looked at me, and he didn't read the speech. The folded pages stayed untouched. I prepared a speech. Orion began, his voice calm, clear, and steady, just like his father's. It had jokes, quotes, all the usual noise. But I won't be reading it today, because what I was going to say doesn't matter as much as what needs to be said right now. He nodded toward the back. My mother has been pushed aside, ignored, and overlooked by this town for as long as I've been alive. Some of you may not even know her name, but you should, because everything I've achieved, I did with her hand steadying mine from behind the curtain. And today, she wasn't even allowed to keep her seat. The silence now was deeper. People shifted, uncomfortable. You talk about values here, Orion continued, his voice growing stronger. Respect, service, excellence. But those aren't words you hang on a hallway plaque. They're things you live. And no one has lived them better than the woman who taught emergency field tactics to a special forces unit without ever firing a gun, who raised me alone while working nights, who never asked for recognition, but gave everything. He gestured to the 6 men standing firm in the back. Those men didn't show up today for politics. They came because someone you chose to ignore saved them. Her name is Alara Vance. And if this school values anything it claims, it will remember her name, the same way it remembers its founding donors. Because people like her don't pass through. They build foundations. He stepped back. No closing joke needed. The truth was the punchline. The audience stood again. This time, it wasn't confusion, it was acknowledgement. Orion walked straight past the graduate section, past the stage, right to me in row 10. He bent low, kissed my cheek, and whispered just 3 words, "We made it." I didn't cry then. I just adjusted his collar, my hands trembling slightly. When the ceremony finally ended, the 6 men approached. They shook Orion's hand. But when they reached me, they didn't offer a handshake. They saluted. One of them, the sniper, Hartley, stepped forward and placed something in my hand. It was the anchor patch, but this one had a new line, embroidered in gold thread, right underneath the word, Supreme Command. I looked at it for a long moment, then just nodded. I didn't need the applause. I accepted the gesture for what it was, truth, finally acknowledged in the open. In the end, Headmaster Ken announced his early retirement by the end of summer. Veronica Sterling vanished from the Parent Leadership Board, her absence an unmentioned victory. At the first PDA meeting that fall, someone suggested a new award, the Vance Recognition for Unseen Service. It passed unanimously. I didn't attend those meetings. I returned to my routines, fixing engines, helping neighbors. I kept that patch, Supreme Command, in my top drawer. I never wore it, not because it didn't matter, but because it didn't need to be seen to be real. A year later, at Crestwood Academy's next graduation, something else remained. In the front row, a single chair was left open. No plaque, no dedication. Just a padded, plain chair facing the stage. When a student asked about it, a teacher just smiled and said, "That's for someone who never needed an invitation to belong." Orion and I were standing by my old truck that evening, watching the sun dip. He asked me, "Do you think people in this town really change, Mom?" I rubbed the oil from my fingers with a rag, looked out at the quiet road, and said, "Some don't. But the ones who matter, yeah, they do." We had been changed, not by the applause, but by the truth being seen. So, here's my question for you. If you had been a Lara, would you have allowed the 6 men to intervene and create that public scene, or would you have preferred to keep your victory quiet and personal? What do you think the headmaster and Veronica Sterling learned that day? Let me know in the comments below.